So I'm going to sort of talk about accountable care in northwest London, and I've used that term sort of in its generic sense because we're covering at least 3 of the 5 CCG boroughs here, but actually I work across 5 CCGs for Central, West, Hammersmith and Fulham, Hounslow and Ely, and I also work into the other 3 CCGs that make up the whole of northwest London, which is Brent, Harrow and Hillingdon. But today we're going to focus on what's going on in the 3 areas. My title is Director of Development, so I do accountable care, but I'm also doing a number of other things to try and bring our organisations together. I'm conscious that although I'm talking about accountable care today, I'm probably going to have loads of conversations with you for my other parts of my remit in the coming weeks and months, because you're actually doing this sort of joining up and connecting thing, which we need to do as commissioners and as providers across the health and care sector. So we'll keep in touch on that. So today's about our journey towards the accountable care system that we're trying to develop across the area. The problems that we're trying to solve. So I'm going to talk about why we're doing this and why we're taking the accountable care model approach. What do we mean by accountable care? What are the plans for change? And then ultimately how you can get involved. And this builds on the previous session that we had in the autumn, where some of you may have been able to attend, and you might see 1 or 2 of the graphics that are a bit similar. But it's sort of reiterating some of those key points and reflecting back what you told us at those events, and I'll come to this as we go through the presentation. There are a couple of things that came up of critical importance that you went through, those of you who were able to attend the previous one, that we're trying to build on in the work we're trying to do now. So, our journey towards accountable care. This is not new. This is really important to say. This is not one of those brand new, another one of those NHS initiatives that we have to go through. This is about building on stuff that we do really well. And it started with 30 organisations, community groups, lay partners and others who came together 3 or 4 years ago and for a number of years to work out how we bring this system of care and health service together. And we called it Whole Systems Integrated Care. And that work became part of the Pioneer programme for the whole of the NHS in England. And you can see from this graphic here that we launched some supporting materials in 2015 and prior to that 2014 that helped us set out a roadmap about how we might achieve accountable care partnerships. Whole Systems Integrated Care identified 3 things that we needed to do if integrated care was to become successful. And these you'll recognise, I'm sure, which is about people being empowered to direct their care and support and to get the right support at the earliest point possible. And that means in the community, in their own homes, before going through the health and care system. The GPs are critical for that success as the coordinating organising force behind it. And then the third one, which is that actually, do our health and care systems enable those things to happen? Does it enable us to work and think differently, to work as integrated provision? And actually, this is where accountable care comes in, because there's work going on those other 2, and there hasn't been much work going on up until I came into post. I've been in post about a year. On this third area, whilst there's been a lot of talk and discussion and debate, we're not actually breaking through some of the difficult challenges that we've got. And this is where we come into it. So why is that important? Why can't we just sort of start working in an integrated way right now, today? Well, actually, we've got loads of issues. We've got a clinical and service challenge. I really like this graphic because it has 2 things. Firstly, it's like London, for those who try and ride a tube. But actually shows that these are all things that go on in health and care services. And you can see that it's very linear. You go to one place, you come back. You go to another place, you come back. And it's just bouncing around. And the services aren't necessarily joined up for the individual or for the best effective delivery for staff and others. So that's a sort of service and clinical challenge that we have. And the problems that creates are we have not enough self-care and well-being work going on across the system. We're not investing enough time, effort and energy in this area of work. There's variation in care, in access, there's poor quality of care, inappropriate settings, unnecessary treatments, duplication, poor mental health outcomes and social isolation. And as you might have seen this graphic last time, that's what it is, that's what it feels like, that's the system we've created, that people have to move around. The buildings and services stay static and people move through. And we have patient experience problems and challenges as well. This is the web of care. Again, you will have seen this, I'm sure. But this is somebody describing how it feels for them, for their carer, for their GP, how they move around the service if they've got complex or multiple needs. and I always think this is really interesting. This is the system we've created, and this is the experience of patients. It's hardly surprising, is it, that we have the challenges that we have. And I think there's a story I heard that really exemplifies this. This is a brilliant initiative, and it goes right down into communities, all sectors, down the high street. You'll see this badge everywhere. But I put it up there is because there's a story I was told by a lady who works with us in Hammersmith and Fulham, a lay member, a lay representative, and she was talking about how her mother, who had advanced stage dementia, would regularly receive 5 carers a day visiting, and each person was responsible for 1/5 of that person's care, of her mother's care. So even if they came in and saw that there was another problem that needed sorting out, they wouldn't do it, because they knew they were on the clock, they had to get out, and by the end of the day they would see, so we've seen 10 people during the day, that's terrific, here's the money for it. Where's the patient outcome of that? And bearing in mind this lady's mother had advanced dementia, so 5 people in a day. That's adding to the problem, that's not solving the problem at all. And it's a real issue that we've got. And this exemplifies it, I believe. So in the 5 CCGs that we're working with, and 3 of those are in the boroughs we're talking about today, we have 600 contracts on the go. And each one of those contracts has about 40 or 50 key performance indicators. Those metrics, I've seen 10 people today, you get a payment. It's what the forward view review, for those of you who have seen it, call it turnstile. I really like that phrase. It's turnstile care. You click through the hospital, you get a payment. You click through the GP surgery, you get a payment. So that means if we have 600 contracts, we have 24,000 key performance indicators that we are supposed to manage year in, year out. That's impossible, isn't it? And even if you saw that and didn't live through it, if we hadn't had those graphics we showed earlier, you would say, looking at that, well, of course you're going to have fragmented services. You're not going to have things joined up. You're going to have, how are you going to get all your staff to service all of that? You're going to duplicate things. We can't keep that going year in, year out. But actually, we've done that. That's the reality of what we're living with right now. So why accountable care? Surely there are other ways of doing this, and other ways of tackling these problems. Well, actually, if we transform the business that we do, so accountable care has a number of elements to it. Right? The accountable care partnerships, accountable care ways of working. But actually, if it's about transforming the way we contract, the way we pay for services, and the way people organise themselves to provide the best care possible for the individual. If we transform that, then we can transform the care we provide. I talked about the business problems, the fragmentation of services, how that is causing the care problems that we are experiencing, our relatives and ourselves are experiencing day in, day out, week in, week out. If we create the conditions for accountable care, which I'll come through to in a few minutes, that we change the way we commission, change the way we pay for services, and we encourage more partnership and integration, then actually we can transform care, which then creates better outcomes for patients. So your test is to count how many parts in there are. I said earlier about it's not a new thing, right? It's really important. So I don't want everybody to sort of take away, oh, it's another one of those initiatives, we can't get behind it. It's not. This has been around a long time. And this is, Sir John Oldham and Jackie White were involved in the Year of Care work that sparked and began all this integration and stuff, which looks at somebody's care within a year and all the different needs they might need. And they talk about how they went to a car factory in 2010 and noticed that our car factory doesn't build all that, it brings it all in, and the car is produced and it becomes a great output. But all those different organisations and companies that provide those parts remain separate companies, but yet they all managed to join together. And what they realised, is what that quote says, is that payments based on individual episodes of care were leading to fragmented approaches in service delivery. So if we pay the acute hospital, and we pay a community service, and we pay a GP, and we pay a mental health, then actually they're looking at things through their own prism. They're doing their own strategy for workforce. They're doing their own long-term care plans and delivery. And so it's not actually getting us anywhere. And it creates inefficiencies and silo working. And what they said was, this has to change if integrated care is to become a reality experienced by patients. So it might be a bit boring, to say, well, you're just going to change the business, the way you do your business, the way you pay for services, and the way you contract for services. It's absolutely critical because it's the spark that allows many, many other things to occur. And the way we transform care for patients. Because with that's like those KPIs tell us we cannot move between the different barriers. So 5 people turning up at the lady's home means at the moment we organise ourselves to be just like that. And unless we take those barriers away, we're not going to get anywhere. So what do we mean by accountable care? And I've heard this said back to me many times over, that this is a takeover, this is a privatisation of health services. I can't speak for other areas, but that's not going to happen here. This is a quote from Chris Ham. I really like it. He says, if you've seen one ACO, Accountable Care Organisation, you've seen one ACO. There is no answer. There is no blueprint. And our aim is not to drag and drop the US model of accountable care. We look around the US, there's loads of them. That one fits, let's take that and plonk it here. It doesn't work, because it's got a different system. But there are some critical ingredients that make it all happen. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is take the best of what that way of working offers and design a version that works for our patients and residents. And this is where you come in. This is the role that you can contribute to this. So this means working with stakeholders. And you may have seen these acronyms, and I should have said at the beginning actually, there might be a few acronyms in here that I use for space reasons. If anything isn't clear, just shout out. But we've got MCPs, multi-specialty community providers, we've got ACPs, we've got BBC, we've got NASA, we've got loads of alphabet soup of all these different things we can do that create accountable care. It doesn't matter for me. I don't think it matters for our colleagues. What matters is that we get the best ingredients from what accountable care does, and we design the version that works. So that's what we're trying to do. I tried to keep my slides quite punchy with some different elements in, because I know it's quite difficult to send it back a little, reading these things, but I thought it was worth it in case we share these afterwards. You will see that some of these are some of the key elements. So accountable care working is where a group of provider organisations join together to take responsibility for meeting healthcare needs. And partners must have strong primary care foundation and links to community assets. That's what these others have experienced. We would go further and say it has to be part. We talk about whole system integrated care. We're also going to talk about whole system accountable care. And they'll include other specialists as we go. These are the common elements. I've got a list of 17 things that occur in all the successful accountable care systems that are happening across the world, America, Europe, the Southern Hemisphere, and in the vanguard sites across NHS England. They all have common themes of the successful ones. Those that have fallen by the wayside didn't do some of these things. Those that did are doing these things. So they're single contracts with pooled budgets across all providers. That's a common element, right? So we get a group of providers together and we say, for that range of services, for that population, we'll create one contract. Not 600, not with 24,000 KPIs, but one. And it'll be clinically led, because we want outcomes. But it has to be organised and so the energy has to come through changes across all the service stratas that health service provide, and that allows us to look into different ways of working. So organised around the same quality and financial incentives, long-term contracts. This came out of the work that we did in October with you. It came out a couple of times when I read through the reports of the feedback, is we, doing that year to year to year to year. We spend 6 months negotiating the next contract, 6 months trying to bed it in, and then 6 months negotiating. We're not transforming, are we? We haven't got a long-term view. It's absolutely critical for success. And then outcomes-based. So not on the KPIs, not on the turnstile, but what outcomes are we getting for the patients and the people we look after? And then the focus on primary and secondary prevention. That's absolutely critical. That's where the magic comes in this. Accountable care then should be seen as a different way of thinking, planning and delivering care, based on people, not buildings, and based on outcomes, not organisations. I'm being a bit bash, that's me, I said that. But I think it is, I was trying to sum it up. And this is where, this is really powerful, I think. So I talked about, there are lots of places we can look to across the world where they're doing accountable care right now. And there's this example in New York State, where they've been an accountable care system for some years, about 3 or 4 years in, having bedded in, they've got multi-partner provision. And they realised, they started to look at the data of the activity, the number of people coming to A&E, and they realised there were peaks and troughs at certain times of the year, and they wanted to understand why that was. And then they looked closer and realised that of those peaks and troughs, there were people coming from certain areas, coming in at these particular times. And when they looked further, they realised that these were poor areas, with poor ventilation, poor conditions in housing. And they were turning up at A&E with heart or pulmonary or lung disorders, asthma, exacerbations, and all that sort of stuff. And what they then decided to do was use the money that they have in their acute hospital system and put it out into the community. And they commissioned their third sector partners to go out and find cases, and they bought air conditioning units for each of these properties, these key properties that they identified, and they installed them. And then the people who were going in to install them then had the opportunity to fall into conversation about other health needs. And it's brilliant. You can see that A&E attendance has dropped. We can't do that now, because the acute system is predicated on having the money from those people who turn into the door. So the acutes, if the acute system hospitals get into trouble now, financial trouble, what they do is they want more people through the door. The community and mental health services, when they get into financial trouble, they want to stop people from coming through the door, because of the way the contracts are organised. It costs them more the more people turn up. When the acute system, the more people they get, the more money they have. So we have to create this system. That's the goal. That's the vision. We can do it. So what are the plans for change? I told you we can do it. We have plans. So we're going to build on the progress. We had, you may have heard, I think in October we probably were talking about a big contract award process. And actually that's probably not the right way to do it. And we sort of come to realise this through lots of conversations with yourselves and others about what is happening. And actually it's really much better to build on what's already going on and build in stages. And that we take small steps to lead to big change. And I put this up because it reminds me of a story. Many years ago we were having some work done on our house, an extension, and they were putting a roof on. The roofers went up, and as he was coming down I was holding his ladder for him, and he nudged our satellite dish and moved a bit, half a millimetre, centimetre maybe. And he said, oh, he said, sorry mate, didn't mean to do that. I said, oh no, don't worry, I hardly moved. He said, yeah, it hardly moved here, but a centimetre here is 1,000 miles in space. Oh, wow, amazing. But that's what we want to do. Little change, little adjustments, because they have massive implications. And we've got to start somewhere. I was talking about it earlier, about the importance of just getting going. Because we haven't tried to do that. We're trying to set out the roadmap and the blueprint and hoping that we can all get there, and that's what will happen. And I had this worry, this niggle in my mind, that if we were following a big contract award process and big bang thing, that you guys and others would get swallowed up and you'd have to find your way through. This change, this new direction, this new approach is a real opportunity to come in at a local level and make the difference. So this is it. This is how we're going to do it. I put West London, but I was trying to capture the area. I don't mean West London specifically, but there's the three boroughs. Learning by doing is what we're going to do now. Bottom-up approach. Work on what's right in Central London and Westminster, what's right in Hammersmith and Fulham, what's right in the West London and the boroughs that cover there, and then build on those things and build up and learn by doing. So what's it like to come together? And I know you'll come to some of this in your experiences, and Steve as well. But actually not allowing to have 5 or 10 or 15 different ways of doing this, 3 different versions of 5 CCGs, but actually we have to share a set of common principles because this system has to add up. What we don't want is to swap what we have now in terms of fragmentation for a different type of fragmentation. So people are being asked to follow a common set of principles. So, based on outcomes. So what are the outcome measures for the over 65 population for children? We follow the same set of outcomes in each area. We might have different priorities, but we follow the same. We have the same method of calculating budgets and so on and so forth. And that we're going to give a bit more time for this to happen. We had said previously 2018, 2019, now we want to do it within the lifetime of the STP, this Sustainability and Transformation Plan. Because that is actually doing other things which contribute to this system change. So that's how we're going to try and do it. So there's 3 key things. It's one of those busy slides I'm not going to dwell on too much, but we want to implement whole system accountable care working. The goals for 2017 are to Work with general practice and primary care at scale, because we all know general practice is under great strain and we have to do something to stabilise that. Work on building and establishing the foundations for primary and community services. And this means working with mental health, social care, third sector provision. It means building on My Care, My Way, the CIS, the Community Independence Service, whole systems integrated care, and on and on. It's building on what we're already doing, learning by doing, small steps towards the big goal. And then building the trust relationships, and then agreeing and implementing the priority outcomes, which I've talked about, the common themes, which we'll come to at another point. And that's what they kind of try and do over the next year. But a note about whole system accountable care. This is a very common quote from Henry Ford, but I really like it. It talks about how we build through partnership and systems coming together. When I talk about whole system accountable care, I'm talking about, we talk about, in the same way we did with whole systems integrated care, it's everybody. What I don't want to happen is that we create a accountable care system that stops at primary care, which is possible, or it stops at primary and community care, which is also possible. We have to take an approach that's whole system. Our problems cannot be solved if we just take a little bit here and a little bit there and we try and mix that up and try and make it work. It has to be everybody. So it has to be third sector, it has to be mental health, it has to be the acute system. How we get there is another challenge, but that's what we have to aim for. It has to be whole system. Really important, really powerful. So how can you get involved? I'm going to leave you with a thought, because colleagues will start to talk about this. I think it's about the importance of having the courage to think differently, right? So the work I'm trying to do is trying to remove the old-fashioned barriers that we've had in place, the parameters, the difficulties. You'll see that picture, things will start to fall into place. You'll see that there's only the gate, there's no fence. So the sheep are quite used to going through gates and not used to going off things, because we've created a system that's been going for 25 years and we've learned to behave in these sorts of ways. What I can do is remove those barriers and parameters. What we have to then do is step into that place and do things differently and have the courage to think and act differently. And that was it. Okay, thank you.